Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. This isn't a tale of top hats and tea, nor of foggy lamplit streets that look like a Sherlock Holmes fan fiction. No, tonight we're slipping quietly down the grimy alleys and into the soot-stained guts of Victorian London, where some of the strangest, filthiest, and most absurd jobs you could imagine were not only real, they were essential. From people who sniffed sewers professionally to children whose entire job was to climb up chimneys and not die, this is history at its most bizarre, its most uncomfortable, and somehow still not the worst job market London ever had. Before we get into tonight's journey, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who else is staying up way too late with me. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background, and let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey. The most bizarre jobs in Victorian London. Imagine waking up to a grey morning in a city where coal dust coats everything: your windowsill, your lungs, even your soul. The streets outside your window are teeming with noise. Wooden wheels on cobblestone, hawkers shouting about kippers, and horses doing exactly what horses do in public with no regard for your shoes. The year is somewhere around 1850. You are poor, very poor. You live in a rented room that isn't really a room, it's more like a box with bad intentions. The wallpaper is peeling in slow, sarcastic curls. Your blanket smells like mildew and shared secrets, and your pillow is just a sack of straw with a grudge. And yet, even in this hard life, you must work. But not just any work. No, you weren't lucky enough to land a factory job or become someone's barely paid apprentice. You've been handed one of the many strange, humiliating, or downright dangerous jobs that Victorian society quietly depended on, while pretending not to notice you. You might be a tosher, wading through the sewers, looking for lost coins and bits of metal with your bare hands. You might be a pure finder, collecting dog poop to sell to leather tanners. Maybe you're a match girl, inhaling toxic white phosphorus until your jaw starts to rot, literally. Or perhaps you're just a mudlark, a child scouring the polluted Thames for anything that might be sold for a crumb of bread. This isn't the London of postcards and palace guards. This is the London that existed in shadows and steam, underfoot and underpaid. And tonight, we're walking straight into it, because nothing says sleep well like a list of horrifying historical jobs. So take a deep breath. Not too deep, you're still in Victorian London, and the air quality is more idea than reality. Let's begin. You open your eyes to the sound of something sloshing. It's not rain, though the ceiling above you does drip with what you're sincerely hoping is just water. It's the sound of someone tipping a chamber pot out a window. You hear it hit the cobblestones with a thick, wet splatter, followed immediately by a shout of, "Mind your head." A bit late for that. Welcome to Victorian London. Your bed is technically not a bed. It's more of a low wooden platform with a sagging straw mattress that has gone so flat it might as well be a bale of hay in denial. The mattress crunches when you move, not from luxury stuffing, but from years of compressed straw, broken dreams, and maybe a mouse nest or two. You shift, and something bites your ankle, possibly a flea, possibly a mouse. Either way, it now lives rent-free in your blanket. You're in a tenement house, not the worst one, but close. The air is damp, with a smell you can't quite place: burnt coal smoke, rotting wood, and the human condition. The window is a single pane of filthy glass, the kind of cloudy that makes everything look like it's covered in a Victorian Instagram filter. Brown, blurred, and vaguely depressing. Your room is just wide enough for the mattress and a small table whose legs are all different lengths. Someone carved their name into it years ago, and judging by the name Ratty John, this piece of furniture has seen things. There's a broken chair in the corner that you definitely don't sit in unless your tetanus shots are up to date, which they aren't, because it's 1,850, and no one even knows what tetanus is. Just that some people get a scratch and then die in horrifying ways. The end. The only source of warmth is a small iron stove, which doesn't currently work, and possibly never did. But you keep a bit of coal on the hearth anyway, just in case you someday become rich enough to afford heat. Or one single egg. You hear your neighbours through the thin walls. There's no insulation, no plaster, just layers of crumbling brick and centuries-old grime. A baby is wailing down the hall. Somewhere else, someone coughs the kind of cough that sounds like it's trying to escape their body altogether. It's a wet, hacking reminder of London's unofficial roommate, tuberculosis. There's no privacy here. Every sound, every movement, every unkind word is shared communally, whether you want it to be or not. The man in the next room is muttering to himself again, probably about the rat that keeps stealing his bread. Or maybe the government. Hard to say which. The floorboards creak beneath your feet as you swing your legs over the edge of the bed. You instantly regret it. The floor is cold, soaked through from yesterday's rain, that somehow leaked through the walls, the ceiling, and possibly the concept of hope. Your feet sink slightly into the wood, which is soft from water damage and lies. You look down and realize you've stepped on something gelatinous. You don't ask what. Your boots are beside the bed, still damp from yesterday's trek through the Thames foreshore, because yes, your job involves being ankle-deep in London's best attempt at a soup made of industrial runoff, dead things, and lost coins. They squelch slightly as you slide them on. The inside is colder than the outside. You pull the laces tight and pretend not to notice that the left boot has a hole wide enough to let in a curious rat if it felt like exploring. You haven't even stood up yet, and you're already tired. The light in the room is thin and grey. London rarely sees sunlight, especially down here in the lower city, where the fog doesn't lift so much as shift slowly from one alley to another like a bored ghost. It's probably around 5:30 a.m. late, actually. Most jobs start before dawn. You're behind schedule, though time means little in a city where the clocks belong to the rich. And the rest of you just wake when the neighbours do. You reach for your coat, hanging on a bent nail driven into the wall. It's heavy with moisture and smells like fish, coal, and whatever you scraped off your trousers yesterday. You're not sure if it's leather or just very stiff wool. Either way, it creaks like an old man when you move in it. A pocket holds something sharp, probably a bit of broken glass you meant to sell. Or a bone. You'll figure it out later. There's a mirror on the wall, cracked, of course. You glance into it. You look like you've slept inside a chimney. Your face is smeared with soot from the coal fire next door, even though you haven't lit one yourself in weeks. Soot is London's favourite cosmetic. It clings to everything. Skin, lungs, and futures. You try to run your fingers through your hair. It doesn't go well. There's a knot near the back that has possibly become sentient. You give up and shove your cap over it. Everyone wears caps. Part fashion, part lice prevention, part hiding the shame. You open the door into the narrow corridor. It's lined with peeling wallpaper that looks like it was once floral. Now, it's mostly a mix of damp and despair. You pass a woman crouched in the hallway, scrubbing the floor with something that might have once been a rag, now just a lump of cloth and regrets. She nods at you. You nod back. There's no need for words. You both know what the day will bring. The staircase down to the street is steep, tilted, and probably not architecturally sound. The banister is a piece of frayed rope nailed to the wall with rusted spikes. You grip it anyway. It's better than falling. Probably. The door at the bottom sticks. You throw your weight against it, and it groans open like a coffin lid in a thunderstorm. Outside is worse. The street is wet, as always, with puddles that aren't water. Just unidentified fluid that occasionally bubbles. The air smells of smoke, sewage, horse manure, and hot meat pies being sold from a cart that hasn't been cleaned since the Napoleonic Wars. You're not awake, you're not rested, but you're alive. And in Victorian London, that's enough to qualify you for work. As your boots hit the cobblestones, already slick with something unfortunate, you brace yourself for another day of bizarre labour. You don't know yet whether you'll be picking bones from ash heaps, wading through muck for scrap, or selling animal droppings to a tannery. But one thing's certain, someone, somewhere, will pay you a penny for something no human should ever have to touch. Welcome to your life. Breakfast in Victorian London isn't so much a meal as it is an emotional challenge. You don't sit down to it, and you certainly don't enjoy it. You find it, scavenge it, or hope it happens to you through sheer luck and timing. First, the toilet situation. Let's get this out of the way early because your bladder is already making its presence known. There is no indoor plumbing in your tenement, of course. You're poor, not a wizard. Instead, there's a single outhouse out back or worse, a communal privy shared between half the street. You head out through a narrow alley that smells like old beer, wet rope, and something no one has identified for several decades. The privy is a wooden box with a hole, and beneath that hole, let's just say it's not fresh air. There's no seat, no privacy, no dignity, and certainly no toilet paper. At best, you might find a stack of newspaper squares hung on a rusty nail, most of it already used, some of it still advertising dead horses for sale. If you're too desperate to wait in line, or if the weather is too miserable, there's always the chamber pot under your bed, assuming you remembered to empty it from last night. That job usually falls to the youngest child in the family, who has to carry it down 3 flights of stairs and dump it into the gutter without spilling it on themselves, the neighbour's cat, or a policeman. Some people skip the whole ordeal and relieve themselves in alleyways. You've done it too, but be careful, public urination is technically illegal, and some constables do love to fine people for it, especially people who look like they can't pay. Now that your personal business is settled in a deeply public way, it's time to freshen up. There is no sink, there is no warm water, there is a bucket, possibly the same one used to wash the dishes, and the laundry, and inside it is water drawn from the pump at the corner of the street. It's cold, not briskly refreshing, not mildly chilly. We're talking straight from the bowels of hell's icebox cold. Your hands go numb within seconds, and your face feels like it's been slapped by winter itself. There is no soap. That's a luxury. If you're lucky, you might have a bit of lye soap, which smells like despair and stings like judgment. If you're unlucky, you just use the cold water and your sleeve and call it good enough. Most people walk around with a thin layer of soot on their skin anyway. It's like London's version of natural foundation. You scrub your face, sort of. You splash, wince, and pat it dry with a cloth that was clean in the previous decade. Your hands smell faintly of coal dust and spoiled milk. You're not clean, not by any modern definition, but you've gone through the motions. And in Victorian London, that's as good as it gets. Now for the teeth, or rather, the gums. Toothbrushes exist, technically. They're sticks with bristles, often shared among family members and rarely replaced. Toothpaste? That's a rich person's fantasy. What you've got is either a bit of salt rubbed on your finger or maybe charcoal dust, because Nothing says minty fresh like the taste of burned wood and grit. You scrub as best you can, but most of your teeth already hate you. They ache, wobble, or have simply exited the building. Toothaches are normal. Rotten breath is universal. You don't smile unless you must. No one else does either. And now finally breakfast, which is misleading because breakfast implies a meal. What you have is more of a caloric event. If you have a job lined up that day and you're lucky, you'll pass a food stall selling something hot. Maybe a meat pie, maybe a slice of fried bread, maybe a scoop of what the vendor insists is eels and mash, but looks suspiciously like shoe leather and wallpaper paste. If you're a mudlark or tosher, one of the many street children or sewer workers, you might eat whatever you find. Bread crusts, bits of dried cheese, or even scraps of potato skins thrown out behind a cook shop. Anything that isn't green, crawling, or already claimed by rats is fair game. Street vendors sometimes sell cheap cups of coffee, though it rarely includes anything recognizable as a bean. Most of the time, it's just hot brown liquid made from roasted chicory, boiled over and over until it tastes like bark and regret. Still, it's warm, and that's enough to make it precious. If you live in a boarding house, breakfast might be included in your rent. This usually means a ladle of gruel, a word that perfectly captures the emotional tone of the food. Gruel is porridge without optimism. It's oats boiled in water until it resembles wet plaster, occasionally salted, never sweetened. If you're very lucky, there might be a splash of milk in it, but only if the cow wasn't coughing that morning. On a really good day, you might find some stale bread. Not freshly baked loaves, those are for the middle class. What you get is bread that could double as a building material. It's dense, greyish, and full of flour that was often cut with chalk or alum to make it stretch farther. Some loaves were bulked out with sawdust. Yes, actual sawdust. You chew slowly, mostly to protect your few remaining teeth. Sometimes a boiled egg shows up, but that's a feast. For drinks, you might have tea, not the fragrant Earl Grey variety served in porcelain. This is reused tea leaves boiled into a murky brew poured into a cracked mug. Sugar is expensive, milk rare. Most people drink it black, bitter, and quietly. Or you skip tea and drink beer, yes, even in the morning, because water, especially from the communal pump, often contains things that would make your intestines consider a career change. Children drink beer too. It's weak, barely alcoholic, but still safer than the water. And let's be honest, it helps dull the misery of having to go work in a match factory for 12 hours at age 7. If you're working a job like Pure Finder, collecting dog feces for a living, you'll need something stronger. Gin, maybe. If someone owes you a favour, or you've got a coin to spare. Cheap gin in Victorian London is everywhere, sold in bottles, cups, or just ladled out from a jug by someone who may or may not be a licensed vendor. One swig burns your throat, peels the lining from your soul, and makes you forget what year it is. And sometimes that's the goal. There's no kitchen where you live. Cooking is done communally, outside, or not at all. You eat on the steps, by the roadside, or perched on the edge of a barrel. Plates are rare. Knives even rarer. You eat with your hands, lick your fingers, and wipe them on your coat, which, by now, has more sauces on it than a butcher's apron. Once you've eaten or failed to eat, you stand up slowly, knees cracking like old floorboards. Your stomach is still empty, but it's used to that. Hunger is a daily rhythm, like church bells or coughing. You breathe in deeply. London responds with a bouquet of damp coal smoke, horse manure, mould, and the faint aroma of pickled onions from a stall down the alley. You are officially ready for work, whether it's shoveling human waste, sifting through river muck, or knocking on doors asking for rags, bones, or metal scraps. You'll need your strength. And by strength, we mean your ability to ignore your stomach for 12 more hours. There's something uniquely cruel about trying to get dressed when your clothes are colder than the weather. You reach for your trousers. They're still damp. Everything is still damp. The concept of dryness, of anything warm and soft and not vaguely moldy, feels like a fairy tale someone once told you through a cracked wall. Your clothing situation, like most things in Victorian London, is a delicate balance of necessity, hope, and creative patchwork. You own exactly one full outfit, maybe two if you're unusually lucky, or recently robbed someone slightly better off. Your trousers are heavy wool, not soft wool, not fashionable tweed. This is itchy, coarse, scraped from a sheep's underbelly kind of wool. It smells like mildew and a barn that never emotionally recovered from a fire. The seams have been repaired so many times they resemble a spider web made of mismatched thread, and every patch is a memory of a tear, a stumble, or an overly aggressive dog. You pull them on, slowly, carefully, because the last time you yanked too hard, the crotch gave out and introduced your neighbor to a level of intimacy neither of you were prepared for. Your shirt is, well, technically it's a shirt. More accurately, it's what remains of a shirt. Linen, once white, now the color of weak tea and chimney smoke. It's thin in the worst places and stiff in others, stained with sweat, food, and the passage of unfortunate time. The buttons are a fantasy. Your shirt is tied closed with string, or maybe a bit of wire. If it stays closed today, that's a win. Your coat is the pride of your wardrobe. It was once someone else's, probably several people's. It's several sizes too big in the shoulders and several too small in the waist. There are burn marks on the cuffs, a hole under the left arm, and a suspiciously crunchy lining that you no longer ask questions about. And then there's your boots. Calling them boots is generous. They're more like foot buckets, misshapen, cracked leather objects that used to be waterproof, maybe, if you believed hard enough. The soles are worn so thin you can feel the texture of every cobblestone, every puddle, every unfortunate mystery squelch on the street. Inside the left one is a patch made from what you suspect is an old glove. The right one has no heel. You walk with a wobble now. It's part of your gait, part of your charm, part of why people don't pick you for chimney sweeping anymore. Too slow, too loud, too broken. If you're a woman, things are worse. Your corset, if you have one, is made from whalebone or wire, and it's second-hand, possibly third. It bites into your ribs when you bend, pinches when you breathe, and collapses entirely if it rains too hard. Your skirt is floor length, of course, because heaven forbid anyone see your ankles and be overwhelmed by desire. It drags through the muck with every step, soaking up whatever the horses and the drunkards have left behind. You wear a shawl, not for fashion, but for warmth. It covers your shoulders, your head, your shame, depending on the day. It smells like your neighbor's chimney and someone else's dinner, and under it all, you're wearing long woolen underthings again, if you're lucky. They itch, they chafe, and they never, ever dry fully. But without them, the cold crawls straight up your spine and settles in for the season. This is your wardrobe. It doesn't change. You wear it until it falls apart, and then you sew it back together with whatever you can find. Twine, horsehair, string from an old tea bag. In Victorian London, clothing is not style. It's survival. Now let's talk about shelter. You call it home because you need to, but your dwelling is one cracked window away from being classified as outside. You live in a tenement building, packed between a tannery and a chimney sweep's depot. The walls are brick blackened from soot, chipped from age. Inside, everything smells faintly of coal smoke and bodies. Your room is one of many in a tall, narrow stack of mismatched floors. You share it with your siblings, or your parents, or strangers who pay rent to sleep on the floor. There's no insulation. The walls sweat in the summer and freeze in the winter. On cold nights, you sleep wearing your coat, your scarf, your hat, and sometimes a bit of curtain you stole from a boarded-up window. There's a fireplace, technically, but you haven't had coal in weeks. You keep a few sticks in the hearth for psychological comfort. Sometimes you stare at them and pretend they're burning. The floor is wood, or it was, until water damage and time turned it into a squishy patchwork of rot and dirt. When it rains, puddles form inside the room. You place your boots under the drips, not because it helps, but because at least they're getting clean. Mice live here. So do cockroaches. You're not sure who's winning. You've got one chair. It's missing a leg. You keep it propped against the wall and use it as a shelf. Your mattress is just straw in a sack. It smells like wet dog, and it pokes you in ways that feel personal. Every morning, you wake up with new bite marks, new itches, and a renewed sense of low expectations. If you're lucky, your tenement has a window. It doesn't open, or close, or block the wind, but it lets in just enough light to remind you how much soot is floating in the air. On rare, clear days, you can see the sky. It's grey. You count that as a blessing. Privacy doesn't exist. Your neighbours fight, scream, sing, and do worse things without caring who hears. You hear every cough, every sob, every wheezing laugh. At night, the building creaks and groans as if it's trying to escape itself. You don't blame it. And the roof? The roof leaks. It always leaks. Buckets sit in corners to catch the drips. One has developed its own ecosystem. You think you saw something swimming in it once, but you're too tired to investigate. You've never heard the phrase safe housing. The idea that a home should be dry, clean, and structurally sound has simply never crossed your mind. You're alive. The walls haven't fallen in. You haven't been evicted this month. That's good enough. So when the wind howls down the alley, rattling the loose panes and slipping through the floorboards, you wrap your scarf tighter. You huddle near the hearth with your knees tucked to your chest. You ignore the rat chewing something behind the cupboard, and you say to yourself, with the certainty only exhaustion can bring, "At least I'm not outside." You step into the street already exhausted. Your stomach is barely full, your boots are still damp, and the wind hits your face like a tax collector with a grudge. But there's no time to dawdle. Victorian London doesn't wait for anyone, especially not the poor. You've got a job today. Or, maybe more accurately, you've got a way to not starve today. Because in the twisted social ecosystem of the 1,850 seconds, employment is a generous word. There are no benefits, no contracts, no safety nets. There's you, a city bursting with filth, and whatever task you can survive long enough to complete. Let's start with one of the worst. Tosha. You climb down into the sewer at dawn. You carry a lantern in one hand and a long metal stick in the other. You're wearing your oldest coat. Not that you own a newest one. And your boots are tied with rope so they don't float off when the sludge gets high. You wade through human waste, dead animals, and centuries of forgotten filth. The stench is indescribable. It clings to you like guilt. It gets into your hair, your lungs, your soul. You poke around in the muck for coins, for scraps of metal, for anything someone above accidentally dropped into the underworld. Every now and then you find something valuable. A ring, a broken bit of silver. Once, a pocket watch that still ticked. You sold it for 3 pence and a meat pie. The pie gave you food poisoning. If you're a mudlark, you don't even get the joy of being underground. You scour the banks of the Thames when the tide is out, digging through wet, black river muck in search of bones, coal, nails, anything sellable. You're soaked within minutes, cold always. The water seeps into your boots, up your sleeves, into your very bloodstream. You might be 10 years old. If you're a pure finder, congratulations. Your job is worse. You walk the streets with a bucket and a stick. You search alleys and curbs, parks and courtyards, looking for dog droppings. Yes, that is your job. You collect pure, a polite Victorian word for canine waste, and you sell it to tanners who use it in the leather curing process. They call it pure. You know it's anything but. The smell follows you everywhere. The worst part isn't the shame or the disgust. It's the competition. Other pure finders guard their roots jealously. Fights break out. Words are exchanged. Buckets are flung. If you're a sweeper, you spend your day sweeping street corners with a makeshift broom, hoping someone tosses you a coin out of pity. It's not a real job. But the soot-covered children who do it often have no other choice. Then there are the rat catchers. You trap rats in the alleys and cellars of the city, sell them to laboratories or brace yourself to pubs that use them for sport. Rat baiting, it's called. Patrons place bets on how quickly a terrier can kill a dozen rats. You hand over the wriggling sack, take your payment, and try not to think about what happens next. Some people, especially children, become chimney sweeps. You're small. That's the only qualification you need. Small enough to crawl up a chimney flue, scrape the soot with a brush, and try not to get stuck, or suffocate, or fall from the roof. Many don't survive. The ones who do are covered in burns, scars, and coughs that never go away. They start young, some as young as 5. Their growth is stunted, their bones bend, their childhoods vanish into a cloud of black dust and cold mornings. But they bring in money. And money, even a handful of pennies, is the only thing that matters. If you're a woman, your labor is no less brutal. You may be a match girl, dipping wooden sticks into white phosphorus that poisons you slowly. You don't know it's poisoning you, of course. You just know your teeth ache, your jaw hurts, and sometimes pieces of it fall off. Phossy jaw, they call it. An occupational hazard. You work long hours for barely a few coins, standing at a table in a room filled with fumes that sting your eyes and rot your insides. Your fingers are yellow, your skin burns. You bring matches home in your pockets, hoping to sell a few extra to drunks near the pubs. Or maybe you're a flower girl, though the flowers are mostly wilted and the customers mostly uninterested. You walk the same routes daily, calling out in a tired voice, hoping a gentleman feels generous or guilty enough to buy one. Your shoes are thin, your hands are raw, and every time someone knocks you aside, you smile anyway. The workhouse looms in the distance, a grim silhouette of starvation avoidance. If you're desperate enough, if your legs give out or your landlord throws you into the street, you go there. But it's not work. It's punishment disguised as charity. Inside, the labor is endless. Breaking stones, picking oakum, that's tarred rope, picked apart with bare fingers. Sorting bones. Meals are watery gruel and crusts of bread. Men and women are separated. Children are shaved, numbered, and made to earn their keep before they know how to spell their own names. The work is designed not just to break your back, but to break your will. If you're truly lucky or know someone who does, you might land a job as a porter, coal heaver, or dock worker. These pay slightly better. You move goods, lift sacks, carry crates up narrow stairs. But even these are dangerous. A single misstep and you lose a finger, or a foot, or your life. There are no sick days, no breaks, no unions. If you're hurt, you don't eat. If you don't eat, you don't work. If you don't work, you die. Simple math. The streets of London are filled with the sounds of labour. Hammering, shouting, coughing, crying. Every alley is a workplace. Every basement, every rooftop, every sewer. You don't retire. You collapse. There are bosses, yes. Overseers, foremen, shop owners. Some are cruel, some are indifferent. The worst are those who smile as they underpay you. You don't complain. Complaining is for people who have choices. You endure, quietly, efficiently. You develop calluses on your hands, your feet, your heart. And every day someone invents a new job that's just a little bit worse. Because no matter how bad your work is, there's always something lower. A fresh horror hiding in a bucket, a hole, or a chimney. And someone desperate enough will take it. By now, your back aches from labor, your boots are soaked with things you'd rather not name, and your hands are stained with soot, blood, or worse. But work in Victorian London doesn't just weigh on your body, it wraps around your mind. Because beyond the filth and fog, the coal smoke and crusted gutters, there's something else. Belief. This city, loud and chaotic as it is, runs not only on steam and labour, but on fear, faith, and folklore. Every street corner has its story. Every shadow holds a superstition. And no matter how tired you are, you never forget them. Let's begin with religion, because in Victorian London, God is always watching. Or at least, that's what you've been told since you were old enough to hold a Bible and not tear the pages. You've never owned a Bible, of course, but you've heard enough sermons shouted from street corners and read enough half-torn pamphlets to know the general idea. Sin is everywhere, and it's probably your fault. You're taught that suffering is holy, that poverty is a test, that cleanliness is next to godliness, even if the nearest soap is 4 blocks away, and guarded by a woman named Margaret, who once bit a constable. You know your place in the world, and you're reminded of it often. Churches, chapels, and mission halls dot the city, offering salvation, soup, and very strong opinions. Preachers rant about the dangers of gin, about the evils of idleness, about the punishment awaiting those who dabble in temptation, laughter, or insufficient hat-wearing. You don't always understand the sermons, but you know this: heaven is above, hell is below, and your daily life seems a bit too close to one of them already. You cross yourself when passing a graveyard. You avoid stepping on cracks. You whisper apologies to the dead if you accidentally kick over a loose headstone. But it's not just God you fear, it's what walks beside him or under him, because London is teeming with superstition. And for the working class, spiritual insurance policies are everywhere. You don't walk under ladders, not because you fear falling paint, but because ladders form a triangle, and triangles, according to someone's grandmother, are sacred and shouldn't be broken unless you want the devil himself knocking on your windowsill. You avoid black cats if they cross your path from left to right, but if it's right to left, it's good luck. Probably, you think. The rules are confusing, no one agrees, but better safe than sorry. You never whistle indoors. You never open an umbrella inside. You never put shoes on a table unless you want to invite death in for tea. If a mirror breaks, you sweep it up very carefully. 7 years of bad luck is no joke when you're already overdue on your rent and slightly on fire inside from the cheap gin. Some people carry charms: a rabbit's foot, a bent nail found during a thunderstorm, a penny with a hole in it. One woman down the street swears by her lucky potato, which she's had for 9 years and keeps in a sock drawer. No one argues with her, not since she cursed a man and his chimney caught fire twice. For protection, you might sew tiny blue beads into the hem of your coat, or wear an iron nail on a string under your shirt to keep away the bad air miasma. The invisible sickness that floats in through open windows and kills children in the night. You've seen it happen. You don't question it. And then there's death. Death in Victorian London is not just an end. It's a career, a spectacle, a thing to be watched and feared and ritualized in the most elaborate and sometimes absurd ways. You know the mourning customs well, though. You could never afford them yourself. The upper class wear black for years, entire wardrobes of sadness. Even the buttons mourn. But the poor? You make do. A strip of black cloth pinned to your sleeve, a soot-stained scarf tied around your hat, a whispered prayer in the alley. Death is everywhere, so you treat it with respect. You tip your cap when a funeral passes. You turn your pockets inside out when walking by a graveyard, so the spirits can't steal your luck. You hold your breath past the hospital and cross yourself when you hear bells tolling. And you never, ever mock a grave digger. They know things. They've seen things. They have dirt under their fingernails and secrets in their pockets. If someone dies suddenly in your neighborhood, there are rules. You cover the mirror, always, so the soul doesn't get confused and stay behind. You open a window to let the spirit out, even if it's snowing, even if it's raining, especially if it's raining, and you don't speak ill of the dead for at least a week, longer if they were decent, or violent, or unusually quiet. Ghosts are real. Ask anyone. There are houses you simply don't enter, streets you avoid after dark, alleys where the gaslights never quite stay lit. Everyone has a story. A neighbor who saw her dead husband in the fog, a boy who heard footsteps behind him and turned to find nothing but still ran for a mile without stopping. There are omens too. A bird flying into your window means illness. A cracked teacup foretells an argument. A rat running toward you is never, ever good. Even the way a candle burns can send a message. Steady flame, all is well. Flickering sideways, someone's watching you. You don't know if it's true, but you don't ignore it either. Because when your daily life is filled with hunger, cold, pain, and the constant threat of death, belief becomes a survival tool. You light a candle when the baby's sick. You mutter a charm when your husband doesn't come home. You whisper to the wind and hope it hears you. It doesn't matter if the science is faulty. Hope doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to get you through another day. By the time midday rolls around, your stomach has become a separate character, moaning, bargaining, and occasionally threatening to eat your shoelaces. But this is Victorian London, and here lunch isn't served. It's scavenged, begged, or bought with the kind of coin that weighs heavier than gold because you know you shouldn't be spending it. You check your pockets. 3 pennies. Maybe 4, if you count the one stuck to a bit of old toffee and hope no one looks too closely. It's enough to get something warm, if not nourishing. Something that fills your stomach for just long enough to forget you're starving. The midday meal, if you can afford it, might come from a street vendor. You follow the smell of burnt onions and hope it leads to something edible. Maybe it's a pie cart. Steam hissing out of the crust like it's trying to escape the filling. The vendor grins, but the grin doesn't reach his eyes. He knows you don't care what's in it. Could be lamb, could be cat, could be last week's pigeon stew rebaked with a new label. You eat it anyway. The crust is flaky in parts, chewy in others. The filling is thick, brown, and mysterious. You chew slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because your body's still deciding whether this is food or a social experiment in gastrointestinal regret. If you can't afford a pie, you go for a winkle stall. A scoop of hot snails pulled from shells with a pin. They're chewy, salty, and vaguely alarming in texture, but they're cheap and hot. You swallow quickly and don't think too hard. Or maybe it's pea soup. Thin, greenish-grey, with the occasional surprise texture floating in it, something between a bean and a regret, served from a ladle by a woman who looks like she could win a fistfight with a barge. Some days, you skip lunch altogether and nibble on a crust you saved from breakfast. Maybe a boiled potato, wrapped in cloth, and still lukewarm if you're lucky, cold if you're not. It's filling in a heavy, joyless sort of way. But joy is for the rich. You're here to survive. Meat, if you ever see it, is tough, stringy, and overcooked or terrifyingly raw, depending on the vendor's enthusiasm and whether or not the fire went out again. You might get a sausage, the kind that's 10% pork and 90% mathematical mystery. Or a bit of tripe, chewy stomach lining, boiled and served with vinegar. It tastes like rubber gloves and smells like ambition giving up. Food safety? Not a concept. You don't ask when it was cooked. Or if it was cooked, you chew, you swallow, you pray. If you wake up tomorrow without dysentery, that's what we call a culinary victory. And yet, in between bites of mystery meat and bread so hard it could be weaponized, there's still room for pleasure. Because even the poorest Londoner needs escape. And that's where entertainment comes in. Sometimes it's a simple thing, a street performer juggling knives, or a one-man band clanging down the lane with cymbals on his knees and a harmonica in his mouth. Children stop to stare. Adults pretend not to, but they slow down all the same. You might gather with a few others to watch a penny gaff cheap theatre held in tiny backrooms or sheds, where actors overact, villains twirl moustaches, and heroes win with suspicious frequency. It's loud, it's crude, it's wonderful. For one copper coin, you get an hour of fantasy, and that's worth more than food some days. For those with a few more coins and slightly fewer morals, there are the music halls. These are smoky, loud, glorious places filled with songs, jokes, and more innuendo than a bishop's diary. Performers with exaggerated makeup belt out comic tunes while the audience sings along half drunk on gin and fume. Everyone laughs, even if the jokes are old. Especially if the jokes are old. Laughter, here, isn't just joy, it's defiance. A way to spit in the face of the fog and say, "Not today, misery. Not today." If you're too poor for the music hall, and many are you, go to the pub, not for pleasure, necessarily, but for warmth, noise, and the illusion of community. Inside, the air is thick with tobacco smoke and spilled ale. The floor is sticky, the tables lean. The barkeep looks like he eats nails for breakfast. But it's shelter, it's light, and for a penny or two, you get a tin mug of porter, the dark, bitter beer of the working class. You drink slowly, savouring the way it dulls your hunger and smooths the edges of the day. You listen to the conversations around you, men shouting about politics, women muttering about landlords, someone in the corner singing a lullaby to no one in particular. Children aren't forbidden. In fact, they're everywhere, sitting on stools, curled under tables, sipping small mugs of watered beer, and watching the world with wide, exhausted eyes. If the pub is too full, you linger outside with the others. You swap stories. You play cards on a barrel lid. You hum a song half-remembered from someone's mother's attic. You talk about work, about love, about the newest crime in the next street over. Maybe it was a chimney boy who fell. Maybe it was a fishmonger who fought a butcher over a borrowed cart. Or maybe it was nothing at all, and the story's just been improved with each telling. Then there are the festivals. Once in a while on holidays, coronations, or sheer boredom, the city explodes into noise and chaos. There are parades with paper streamers, fire breathers, Punch and Judy shows where puppets smack each other silly, and children shriek with laughter. During these moments, even the poorest find joy. You dance in the street. You eat roasted chestnuts sold by a man with no teeth and too many opinions. You buy a paper hat, wear it proudly, and forget that your socks are still wet. And if you're really lucky, there's a fair in town, rides that creak, games you can't win, stalls selling candy made from boiled sugar, and the hopes of children. You spend your last coin on something sticky, bright, and entirely without nutritional value, and for 5 minutes you are not poor. You are just a person, laughing in the dark, surrounded by light and music, and the smell of burnt sugar. And then the fair moves on. The lights dim, the music fades. You're back on the cobblestones. Your shoes are still broken. Your belly is still half empty, but you carry the sound of that laughter like a secret in your coat pocket, because even in a city built on suffering, joy finds cracks to crawl through. You've made it through another shift, another meal, or the suggestion of one, and now you're sitting in a doorway, resting your back against crumbling brick. When you hear it, a cough, not a polite little throat clear, not the dry tickle of a dusty morning, but a deep hacking, rattling thing that sounds like someone trying to cough up their lungs and the floorboards they're standing on. You don't look, you don't have to, you already know what it means. Because in Victorian London, illness is everywhere, and more often than not, it's not just a cough, it's a sentence. You've known people who disappeared in weeks, even days. One day they're sweeping the curb next to you, the next, they're gone. Their name whispered, their belongings sold, their room already filled by someone else desperate enough to pretend they don't hear coughing through the wall. The most feared of all, consumption. The name itself sounds poetic, tragic. It almost romanticizes the decay. But there's nothing romantic about it when it's inside your own chest. You know the signs. Everyone does. The pale skin, the sunken eyes, the blood on the handkerchief, the slow fading of strength, until even sitting up becomes a negotiation with your ribs. No cure, no mercy, just a slow, wheezing decline, like a candle burning out from the inside. But consumption isn't the only monster lurking in the fog. There's cholera, which comes in waves, blue-lipped, cramping, violent. You go from fine to dead in under a day, your body turning against itself in the most humiliating ways. It comes through water, they say. Dirty pumps, contaminated wells. You've stopped drinking from the Broad Street pump ever since the last outbreak. Just the thought of it makes your stomach churn. Typhoid, diphtheria, scarlet fever, all of them roam the city like stray dogs, snapping at children first, then the weak, then anyone who forgot to wash their hands. Not that you always can. And, of course, there's smallpox. That one leaves a mark. Literally. If you survive, and many don't, you wear its signature for life. Scars, pockmarks. Some wear them like armor. Others hide them with scarves and shadows. Children die easily. Babies, especially. You've seen too many wrapped in blankets and carried out the back door, quietly, without fuss, because grief costs time and money, and neither is something the poor can afford. And when the sickness comes for you, you pray it's merciful, or at least not embarrassing, because illness isn't just painful, it's expensive. Doctors? That's adorable. You don't have a doctor. You have Mrs. Arkwright, 2 doors down, who used to be a midwife before her eyesight went. She makes herbal tinctures in cracked bottles and ties chicken bones with string to draw out the bad humours. Or you go to the apothecary, where shelves are lined with bottles full of strange powders and alarming liquids. He'll mix you a tonic that burns going down and makes you see stars, but it might calm your cough. Or it might dissolve your stomach lining. It's a gamble either way. You've heard whispers of laudanum a miracle, they say. Just a few drops and the pain goes away. But it's opium, and it's expensive, and addictive. Some say it quiets babies who won't stop crying. Some say it quiets them forever. If you're desperate, and you usually are, you try the old ways. Charms, prayers, bloodletting. You visit a woman in the alley behind the butcher's who reads your pulse and tells you to avoid cabbage for 3 weeks. You do it, not because you believe her, but because what if she's right? You try mustard plasters, hot bricks, cold compresses, raw onion poultices. You drink tea made from boiled bark. You chew on licorice root. You whisper your sins to the fire and beg it to burn them before your lungs do. Hospitals? Only if you want to die faster. They're overcrowded, understaffed, and unsanitary. You've heard stories of surgeons wiping their hands on aprons stained with yesterday's patient and using the same saw on 3 people without washing it. Anesthesia is new and rare. Mostly it's whiskey, a wooden stick to bite, and someone to hold your arms down while the cutting happens. If the wound doesn't kill you, the infection might. People lose limbs, fingers, toes, feet. You've seen a man walking on peg legs made from chair parts. You've seen a woman with no nose. She wears a veil and doesn't speak. The worst part? You get used to it. You get used to funerals, small ones, no flowers, no processions. Just a body, a box, and a hole. If you can't afford the box, you rent one. Use it for the service. Then dump the body in a shroud into the ground and return the coffin for the next person. The rich have cemeteries with angels and fences. The poor have mass graves, pits really, dug wide and deep, bodies layered in silence. You don't know who you're buried with, and no one keeps track. And so you fear death not just because it's final, but because it's unceremonious. You die in your bed, and the neighbors wrap you in rags. You die on the street, and the police drag you away like trash. You die in the workhouse, and no one knows your name. Even your body has value to someone else. There's talk of resurrection men, grave robbers. They dig up the newly buried and sell them to medical schools for dissection. You don't even get to rest in peace. You get studied, sliced, and passed around by people in white coats who think you're a lesson, not a person. So you live with a kind of quiet paranoia, not just of dying, but of being forgotten, misused, or sold after. You sleep lightly, you cough quietly, you hide your fevers, and pretend your cuts aren't red around the edges, because sickness draws attention, and attention in this world is danger. You pray for health not because life is joyful, but because it's the only option. You cling to your vitality like a secret. You drink your tea. You avoid the pump. You rub salt on your gums and whisper to your ribs. Because even in the choking fog of disease and decay, even when the air itself seems to carry sorrow like a perfume, you wake up each morning and try again, because you're not ready to be carted away. Not yet. By now, you've worked, coughed, eaten something suspicious, and possibly avoided a grave. But as hard as life is for you, it's even harder for those around you, because in Victorian London, poverty isn't just personal, it's generational. And the weight of survival falls hardest on the shoulders of women and children. Let's start with women. If you're a woman, you're expected to be everything and own nothing. You work, you serve, you endure, and yet, legally, you're not even considered fully a person. You're property. First of your father, then of your husband, if you're lucky enough to have one, or unlucky enough, depending on the man. Your days begin before dawn and end well after dark. Whether you're poor or extremely poor, you're working either in the home or outside of it, sometimes both. If you're a wife, your role is caregiver, housekeeper, cook, nurse, seamstress, laundress, and therapist, all rolled into one, without ever being asked how you feel about any of it. You rise early to stoke a fire that doesn't exist, sweep a floor that never gets clean, and boil water that takes half an hour just to become slightly warm. You wash clothes by hand in freezing basins, scrubbing until your knuckles bleed, then hang them in air so thick with soot it feels like washing your sheets and then dragging them through a chimney. If you have a job, and many women do, it's the kind that eats your body for pennies. You might be a laundress, boiling garments in huge pots, wringing them dry until your arms ache and your fingers go raw from the lye. You might be a charwoman, cleaning other people's houses, scrubbing their floors while they pretend not to see you. You might be a domestic servant, working in a grand house with no rest, no voice, and one afternoon off every other week, if you're lucky. And if you're unmarried or widowed or just too desperate to care, you might turn to the oldest profession in the city, prostitution. The streets of London are full of unfortunates, women and girls, some as young as 12, working the alleys, the music halls, the brothels tucked between butcher shops and gin dens. Not because they want to, but because they need to. There's no protection, no safety, no union, just danger, judgment, and the constant risk of disease. And yet, for many, it's the only work that pays enough to eat. You might have children. Most do. Now you're not just responsible for staying alive, you're responsible for keeping tiny, fragile, hungry people alive too. If you're a mother, your body never really recovers. You give birth at home, often without help, or with help that's more superstition than science. The midwife has 2 hands and a bottle of gin. That's about it. No epidurals, no sanitation, no guarantee that you or the baby will survive. And if you do survive, the next phase begins immediately. There's no maternity leave, no crib, no nursery wallpaper with bunnies. You breastfeed when you can. When you can't, you try to find a nurse, or water down cow's milk and hope it doesn't kill the child. And the child? They work too. Childhood, in the modern sense, doesn't exist here. Children are not innocent bundles of joy. They are tiny labourers, expected to earn their keep the moment they can stand. If you're a boy, you might be a chimney sweep, climbing into flues so narrow your shoulders scrape raw. You scream, but your master doesn't hear you or pretends not to. You might be a mudlark, barefoot in the Thames, picking through glass and bone. You might sell matches or flowers or newspapers, shouting headlines you don't understand, just to scrape together a few pennies. If you're a girl, you might be a maid, a seamstress, or a beggar. You learn quickly how to dodge hands that grab too tightly, words that come with strings, stares that never mean anything good. Education, if you're lucky, you get Sunday school. A few letters, maybe your numbers, enough to read a sign, to write your name if someone asks you to. But that's it. There are ragged schools set up by charities where children can learn for free. But many parents don't send their children because even the time spent learning is time not spent earning. Family life, then, becomes a careful dance of necessity and exhaustion. You live close. You sleep even closer. Entire families packed into single rooms, sometimes sharing a bed, sometimes the floor. Privacy is a myth. Arguments are frequent. So is affection, though it's often quiet, tucked into a shared crust of bread, a repaired sock, a lullaby hummed under coal smoke. Fathers, when they're around, are exhausted. They come home from docks or factories or coal yards and collapse. Some are gentle, some are not. The city bruises everyone, but it leaves different marks on different hearts. And when one parent is gone dead, arrested, vanished, the family adapts. Older children step into the role. A 12-year-old boy becomes the man of the house. A 10-year-old girl becomes a second mother. There's no time for grief. You move forward or fall behind. Still, there are moments, a quiet meal, a shared joke, a game played with buttons and chalk, the warmth of another body on a cold night, even if the blanket is too thin, and sometimes, miraculously, there's joy. Birthdays, though rare, are celebrated with scraps and songs. Holidays bring meat, if you're lucky, and maybe a sweet baked thing that tastes like memory and sugar. You hold on to those moments like charms, because family is all you have. The city won't protect you. The laws won't. The landlords won't. But your brother might. Your mother will. Your child definitely will. Because in this world of fog and filth, love isn't a feeling, it's a responsibility. It's making sure someone eats before you. It's walking slower so little feet can keep up. It's sharing your last coin, your last crust, your last hope. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to keep you going. By now, the sun has reached its peak though in Victorian London. That simply means the grey mist is slightly brighter and the shadows slightly sharper. It's afternoon, which means there's still hours of work ahead, if you're lucky enough to have it. If not, you have something far worse: time. Time without work is dangerous, not just for your stomach, but for your reputation, your standing, your survival. Because in this world, idleness isn't rest, it's criminal suspicion. You loiter too long, and you're labelled a vagrant. You sit down on a doorstep that isn't yours, and someone might call a constable. You stand at the market too long without buying, and the stall owner eyes you like a thief. Even if you've done nothing wrong, people assume you might. That you will. That it's only a matter of time. This is a city that punishes poverty, not with sympathy, but with suspicion. And so the afternoon becomes a balancing act, working if you can, appearing busy if you can't, and always avoiding the wrong kind of attention. Because conflict is everywhere, and it wears many hats. You might be cleaning windows and a passerby throws a slur. You might be sweeping a street corner and someone pushes you aside. You're poor, so you're invisible. Except when you're not, then you're a nuisance. Sometimes it's not words, it's fists. Street fights break out over anything. A spilled drink, a stolen glance, a borrowed tool not returned. In a world where people have almost nothing, even the smallest slight feels enormous. Disputes turn violent fast. Knives are common. Bottles become weapons. Bricks get thrown. No one calls the police. Or if they do, it's not to protect you. The law, as it stands, is not your friend. Constables patrol the streets, but rarely for your benefit. They're there to protect property, to protect the wealthy, to make sure no one disturbs the illusion of order. If you're accused of theft, good luck proving otherwise. Trials are fast, sentences harsher. You've seen children hauled off for stealing bread, a woman jailed for vagrancy, which just means being too poor in the wrong place. And debt? That's a crime too. If you owe money on rent, on bread, on a loan for a coffin, you can be arrested, even imprisoned. Debt prisons still exist, and they're as bleak as you'd expect. Cells filled with men who couldn't pay, and now can't work to earn their way out. There's class conflict in the air, thick as the smoke. The rich glide by in carriages, faces behind lace curtains, noses turned toward the sky. Their boots are polished, their dogs are groomed, their clothes have never been patched. You pass a wealthy woman in the street, and she clutches her purse. A man in a top hat looks at you like you might smear grime on his coat by proximity, and then he steps over the man lying unconscious in the gutter, without blinking. The poor know the rich. The rich pretend not to know the poor, and that's the way the city runs. But conflict doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it's closer to home. Landlords, for example, most of them don't live in the same neighborhoods as their tenants. They own rows of crumbling buildings they never visit, charging rent for rooms that are technically upright but emotionally collapsed. If you fall behind on rent by a day, even your things are thrown into the street. Sometimes while you're still sleeping, your mattress ends up on the cobblestones. Your children cry. Your neighbors pretend not to see. It's not because they don't care. It's because they know they might be next. So you scrape, you beg, you borrow. You pay the rent even if it means you don't eat, because the street is worse. Always. And then there are the workhouse threats. If you truly can't support yourself or your family, You might be forced into a workhouse. It's the last resort, the place you speak of in whispers. The idea is relief. The reality is punishment. Families are separated the moment they walk in. Husbands from wives, children from parents. You sleep in rows, under supervision. You eat bland food, do exhausting labor, and are reminded at every turn that your presence is barely tolerated. It's designed not to help you, but to deter you, to make you feel so ashamed, so broken, that you never ask for help again. Social conflict isn't just personal, it's systemic. You've heard the word charity before, and you've stood in lines at soup kitchens and mission houses. Sometimes the food is hot, sometimes it's old, sometimes it comes with a sermon long enough to make your stomach forget why it's growling. There's a strange balance in charity work. Some give with kindness, others with judgment. A bowl of soup and a warning about sin, a pair of shoes and a lecture on cleanliness. You smile, you nod, you say thank you, because free is rare, and pride is expensive. And yet despite the poverty, despite the cruelty, there's solidarity too. Among the poor, among the struggling, there are moments of rebellion, of resistance. You've heard whispers of unions, forming quietly in back rooms and taverns. Workers organising match girls, dockers, weavers demanding safer conditions, fair wages, shorter hours. It's dangerous, of course. Bosses fire anyone suspected of organising. Police break up meetings. But the idea spreads that maybe you deserve better, that maybe a job shouldn't kill you slowly, that maybe, just maybe, the people who make the city run should have a say in how it runs. But until that day comes, the afternoon grinds on. You return to your work if there is any left. You clean another stairwell, sweep another street, mend another shirt. You duck a thrown bottle, avoid a fight, step aside for a carriage that splashes mud all over your coat. You smile when someone snarls. You stay silent when accused. You keep your hands in your pockets and your eyes down, because conflict is everywhere. And in this city, the one who stays standing is the one who knows when to duck, when to nod, and when to walk away. Night comes early in Victorian London. Not because of the time, but because of the thickness of it, the way the fog curls around gas lamps, swallowing their yellow glow like a greedy mouth. Shadows stretch unnaturally long across cobblestone. The sky turns from grey to black, without ever quite convincing you it's dark, because everything was already dim. Now it's simply worse. You pull your coat tighter, not because it helps, but because it's what you do when fear creeps in. And it does, every night, because night in London isn't rest, it's risk. The city changes after sunset. It becomes quieter, yes, but not calmer. The chaos doesn't leave. It just crouches, watching from alleyways and doorways and windows with broken panes. Everything becomes more dangerous, more uncertain, and above all, more alone. The first thing you notice is the cold. Daytime damp is bad enough, but nighttime chill seeps into your bones like it's looking for a place to settle down. If your boots were wet earlier, and they were, they're now little leather refrigerators. You feel it in your toes first, then your knees, then your teeth, as you try not to chatter. If you're lucky, you're headed home to your shared bed, your straw-stuffed sack, your spot by the wall where the wind doesn't hit quite so hard. If you're unlucky, you're still out looking for one last job, one more coin, anything to keep you off the street. Because sleeping outside is a kind of gamble. You might find a sheltered doorway, a spot under the bridge, maybe a sewer grate still steaming faintly from underground warmth. Or you might find someone else already there, and not everyone shares. There are stories, too many of them, about what happens to those who fall asleep in the wrong place. A boy beaten for trying to rest under a market stall. A woman found frozen near street. Giles curled like a question no one bothered to answer. Night is when people disappear, and it's not just the weather, it's the people. During the day, danger walks in daylight, drunkards, thieves, policemen with something to prove. But at night, it slinks, it whispers. There are gangs, young men with nothing to lose and knives that cost less than a loaf of bread. They roam in packs, especially near the docks. They don't always rob you. Sometimes they just need to remind the world they exist. Then there are the men who don't want money, just power, just fear, just the satisfaction of hurting someone more vulnerable than themselves. You don't make eye contact, you don't speak, you move quickly. And if someone follows, you run even if your feet are sore, even if your legs feel like rope. And sometimes you don't run fast enough. Even the light is dangerous. Gas lamps flicker weakly on the corners, but they cast more shadow than safety. Some neighborhoods don't have them at all, or the lamps are broken, smashed by vandals, or simply left to rot. Darkness is a tool for thieves, for liars, for things that crawl. And then there are the fires. Every week, somewhere in the city, something burns. A bakery, a laundry, a pub, a home. The buildings are packed tight, the walls made of dry timber, the staircases crooked and narrow. A single overturned lamp, and the whole structure is gone. You've seen it happen. The orange glow in the distance, the smoke rising like a monster, the crowd gathered, helpless, watching as someone's entire life goes up in flames. No alarms, no organized firefighters for the poor, just buckets passed hand to hand, desperate shouting and prayers whispered under your breath. You dream about fire sometimes, not because you fear it most, but because it feels inevitable. And in the back of your mind always is death. Death doesn't knock here. It just lets itself in. It visits the sick, the old, the very young. It slides in quietly, like fog under the door. Or it strikes hard and sudden, an accident, a slip on the ice, a fight gone wrong, a bite that turns septic. People die in the street. People die in their sleep. People die without warning, without ceremony, without anyone noticing, until the smell rises through the floorboards. You've seen bodies. Everyone has. You see them carried out on makeshift stretchers, sometimes carted away with trash, covered with whatever someone has: a coat, a shawl, a piece of sacking, and no one stops. Because stopping means remembering, and remembering means feeling, and feeling, well, that's dangerous too. Some people speak of ghosts. You're not sure whether you believe in them, but you felt the air change in an empty room. You've walked past a closed window and felt the chill. You've heard crying where no one lives. And once, just once, you smelled roses in a place where only rats had died. You don't ask questions. You just nod to the dark and keep walking. Eventually, you get back to your room, or your corner, or your nest of rags beneath the stairs. If you're very fortunate, you share a bed with someone. Not out of romance, but survival. Body heat is the poor man's blanket. A family of 5 sleeps head to foot. A widow and her child curl into each other, arms wrapped so tight, even the cold has to knock first. There's no brushing of teeth, no flannel pajamas, just layers of what you wore that day. You don't undress, you don't dare. The floor's too cold, and besides, you never know when you'll need to run. You lie down. The straw crackles, your stomach growls, but there's no food. Your muscles ache, but there's no medicine. Outside, someone shouts. A baby cries. Somewhere else, a bell tolls. You close your eyes, and for a moment, your body forgets everything. The bruises, the hunger, the smell of piss and coal smoke and despair. Because for just a moment, in sleep, you are free. Free from cold, free from work, free from the endless gnawing of fear in your gut. And as your breathing slows and the dark folds in around you, one final thought drifts through your mind. You survived today. Not everyone did. The city is quiet now, not because it's peaceful, but because it's exhausted. London doesn't sleep so much as it collapses for a few hours, curling up in its own filth and fog, snoring through cracked chimneys and rusted iron drains. You're lying still, finally. Not because your bed is comfortable, it isn't, but because there's nowhere else to go, nothing left to do. You've worked, walked, begged, coughed, endured, and that's the rhythm of your life here. Always another dawn to crawl toward, another job that hurts your body, another mouth to feed, another cold to survive. But not now. Now, it's night, and you're allowed, at last, to rest. The floor beneath you is uneven. Your blanket is damp at the edges, and something small and probably alive moved when you shifted just a moment ago. But you're too tired to care. You've been too tired to care for weeks, months, years, maybe. Fatigue is just part of your blood now, like coal dust, like hunger, like hope, in its strangest, faintest form. Outside, someone is still shouting, a drunk, or a man arguing with ghosts. That happens here. People break slowly, quietly, like bricks chipped by fog and soot, until one day they crumble and no one even notices they're gone. But here's the thing about history: it forgets the noise, the pain, the smells, the bruises. When people speak of Victorian London, they talk about steam engines and scientific marvels, about empire and innovation, the birth of industry, the rise of the middle class. But you know better. You've seen what history forgets. The dirt under fingernails that never come clean. The jobs so strange, so foul, so absurd, they defy explanation. The work that required crawling through sewage. The labor that destroyed children's bodies before they even knew how to spell their names. You were there. At least for tonight. You walked the streets barefoot, dug through the muck for bones, hauled water up crooked stairs, risked infection just for a sip. You swept coal dust from floors no one noticed. You brushed your teeth with soot. You tried not to choke on chimney ash while you smiled and called it breakfast. You worked. And when that didn't pay enough, you worked again. And through it all, you saw the others. The washerwomen scrubbing until their skin bled. The match girls with their phosphorus-poisoned jaws. The toshers in the sewer. The mudlarks in the river. The pure finders with their buckets of filth. The grave diggers. The flower sellers. The rat catchers. The street sweepers. The bone pickers. The forgotten. The bizarre. The essential. There was no glamour in it, no comfort, just survival, moment by moment. And yet somehow, despite the odds, you made it through the day. That is, perhaps, the most remarkable part of all, the human will to keep going, to sing after suffering, to find laughter in ash, to fall asleep beside a broken window and still dream of a better tomorrow, because there were dreams, even here, in the worst corners of the city. A dream of a warmer coat, a bed that didn't smell of mildew, a day without pain, a job that paid just enough, a full meal, a life where your child grows up and doesn't die before their name is learned. And now, as your breathing slows and your muscles begin to ease, you feel the weight of those dreams settle into your chest like a warm stone. Not heavy, just present, a reminder that even in a world that forgot your name, you mattered. Even if history didn't write it down, you built the very streets it walked on. And now, you can let go. Let the ache in your bones soften. Let the noise of the city drift into a murmur. Let your mind settle. You're no longer searching the gutters for a coin. No longer climbing into black chimneys or sorting bones in the dust. You're not dipping sticks into phosphorus or trudging through the foreshore for rusted nails. Not anymore. You are done, for now, and that is enough. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in Victorian London. Sleep well. S.